Oh, Luigi.
Take it upon store.
Wait, both of you guys?
She'll never notice.
No, DK, no, no.
Don't do it, son. How's that
Who the
game
hell are
gonna help
you?
your putting?
Just take it. Take it, take it, take it, take it, take it. Take it.
Okay, why is it Sonic has to be the one that takes them on in the end? How do you do, folks? Got another Bladeslinger vlog for you, and today I thought I would give you guys a brief overview of the origins of the Mascot Platformer. I thought I'd do this because I got some Mascot Platformers coming for the showcase here soon. And, you know, I do talk about this genre an awful lot, considering what I mostly talk about here on the channel is Sonic the Hedgehog. So I figured, what the hell? Something else I want to clarify before I start, though, is I'm trying out a new microphone with this video as well. I got some lapel microphones for when I have friends over on the screen. So give me some feedback in the comments of how this sounds, because I would like some input on it. So anyway, the Mascot Platformer, how did this get started? Well, as best I can figure, the first and what we would generally refer to as the Mascot Platformer would be 1981's Donkey Kong. Outside of the fact that it was really the start of a gaming giant, as it was Nintendo's first big video game, it also laid the groundwork for really platformers in general. It was one of the few games at the time that you could actually beat, whereas most games at the time were all about getting a high score. It introduced a lot of elements that would become commonplace in the genre, with cartoony characters, acrobatic characters, all that stuff. Some puzzle elements to it too. And yeah, it was just a first for video games in a lot of ways. Now, even though the game is called Donkey Kong, you still do play as Mario, but he actually wouldn't get top billing until a few years later with Mario Bros. Released in 1983. So unlike Donkey Kong, this was more of a, well, I guess you could call it an arcade game as opposed to a straight Mascot platformer. This is primarily because this one leaned more into, you know, getting a high score and stuff like that, and puts less emphasis on tight platforming in favor of a more fast-paced, action-oriented gameplay loop. However, it would also lay the foundation for what would eventually become what we know today as the Mascot Platformer with 1985's Super Mario Bros. When you think of a 2D side-scroller, you really have Mario Bros. To thank for that, because it really nailed down how the genre is supposed to work with its tight game design, its varied levels. Like, it's probably the single most influential video game of all time, outside of maybe Pong, which is only has it beat because it was probably debatably the first video game ever made. But in the 80s, Super Mario Bros. Was the game to beat. So anyone who was looking to challenge Nintendo at the time needed to have a game that could compete with it. And so that basically meant that when Sega put out their own console, the Sega Master System, they tried to compete with Mario with their own 2D side-scroller, which would be Alex Kidd. Unfortunately, that play didn't really work out for them. Well, I wouldn't say that Alex Kidd is necessarily a bad game. It was very clear what it was trying to do. It was just trying to be Sega's answer to Mario Brothers, and a lot of people would say that it doesn't even hold a candle to it. However, Sega would realize their mistake with Alex Kidd. So when they started working on the Genesis, they started trying to figure out ways that, you know, they could compete with Mario, but in a way where people wouldn't, you know, immediately make that connection to it. You know, make something that was less of a ripoff and more something that was the same type of game, but with its own spin on it. And that's probably an unintentional pun, because their efforts would eventually culminate in Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, Sonic and Mario do share the same genre. They are both 2D platformers. However, Sega made a point to include some elements to Sonic to set apart from Mario, whereas Mario is more about careful platforming. Sonic puts a little more emphasis on speed. The level themes are a bit more varied, taking advantage of the Genesis hardware. There are a wider variety of enemies and traps to deal with. And in general, Sonic just had more of an edge compared to Mario. A lot of people would say at the time that Sonic was the cool, fast, hip dude, whereas Mario was the fat, slow, old man, which really did define Sega's image at the time because, they sort of leaned into that in order to set themselves apart from Nintendo, who had very strict content control on what they could have, what developers can make on the console, I mean. So Sega really embraced appealing to an older audience, and Sonic just worked really well for that. It really appealed to the youth of the time, and it still appeals to the youth of today because, Sonic is still one of the coolest video game characters ever. However, when Sonic came out, the floodgates for the Mascot Platformer just opened up big time because there were tons of games coming out that were trying to cash in on Sonic's success with these wide variety of platformers that starred some kind of anthropomorphic animal, usually depicted with some kind of bad attitude. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. One of my personal favorites from this time period is probably Rocket Knight Adventures, which I think the reason it succeeded was because it wasn't directly trying to be Sonic. It was very much trying to be its own thing. Sparkster, for instance, while he can appear to be badass like Sonic can be, he's just as capable of being silly and goofy and cute as well, which is probably why the character tends to be fondly remembered, especially by those in the retro scene. It's certainly one of my favorite platformers from the time. But then you had stuff like Bubsy, Awesome Possum kicks Dr. Machino's butt, and like too many other games to count that represented people who just thought that the key to making a successful game was just a cool character with a bad attitude and not really thinking about the gameplay or what made Sonic special to begin with. Bubsy is definitely the poster boy for this, but believe me, there are far worse examples of it than him. And really, that really speaks to how popular Mascot platformers were in the 90s. It's like today where, how it seems like you throw a stick at a wall of games, you're likely to hit a first-person shooter. Well, that was essentially the case in the 90s, but you just replaced the first-person shooter with the Mascot Platformer. And yeah, so that didn't stop for a while. Even into the 3D age, you had games like Super Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon. So it was just the golden age of 3D platformers, and that would continue into the PlayStation 2 era as well. The PlayStation 2 probably had the best lineup of 3D platformers with the three-way touch of Sly Cooper, Ratchet & Clank, and Jak and Daxter. Nintendo was putting out lots of great platformers. Even Microsoft at the time was trying to have a 3D platformer on their console with Blinks. It didn't go anywhere, and when Halo came out, that really shifted the focus of what Microsoft was doing with their game library, and really the focus of the gaming industry in general, because after that, 3D platformers sort of fell out of favor. Now, that's not to say that there weren't any coming out, but they just weren't as prominent as they once were. But today, the Mascot platform is still something you do see on occasion, and it's just amazing what they can do with the technology these days. Some really good examples, like, of course, the Mario series is something that cannot be passed over. Mario Galaxy, Mario Odyssey, even the Mario 3D Land games are worth playing. Sony has a couple of good ones. Astrobot was fantastic last year. The only company that doesn't really seem to do these Mascot platforms anymore is, of course, Microsoft, because they're too focused on first-person shooters and the hardcore crowd, who evidently don't play these games, but I really don't believe that. I mean, I feel like every gamer has at least one Mascot platformer that they enjoy. And, you know, with Astrobot doing so well recently, and, you know, with Nintendo about to put out the Switch 2, I guarantee there's going to be a Mario game in there somewhere. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we're heading towards a new era of 3D platformers. Again, with Astrobot doing so well and making references to so many different Sony franchises, I see no reason why they couldn't bring back Sly Cooper and Jack and Daxter, as well as do more games in the Ratchet and Clank series. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart was amazing as well. And yeah, also something else that shouldn't be forgotten. Another area where you typically see a lot of these mascot platformers these days is in the indie crowd. Some good ones to come to mind are Blue Fire, Corn Kid 64, I think it is. It's a game Nitro Rat really likes. There are Demon Turf. That's another really good one. But yeah, the mascot platformer is certainly an interesting subgenre of games. But that's how it all came about. Like, it started with Mario. Sonic sort of perfected the image of what people associate with it. You know, this platformer that tends to star some kind of anthropomorphic animal or creature, which usually informs what kind of abilities they have. And more often than not, it leads to some pretty damn good games. So, yeah. But anyway, that's your little history lesson on that one, guys. Anyway, again, let me know in the comments how the audio came out on this one, because I am curious if this one sounds better compared to my typical microphone. But that's going to do it for now, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow for the showcase.